Sam Holland didn't leave the city because he hated it. He left because it never shut up. After nearly 15 years working in the fast-moving gears of the tech industry, first as a software developer, then a team lead, and eventually a quiet burnout specialist, Sam finally got tired of the notifications, the meetings about meetings, and the traffic that made every grocery run feel like an obstacle course. But what really pushed him out wasn't a single moment. It was 1,000 small ones that whispered the same truth. Peace isn't programmable. So he bought land. 10 acres of old-growth forest, an open meadow tucked beyond the eastern edge of the metro boundary, just far enough outside city zoning to escape the reach of neighborhood design guidelines and homeowners associations. He paid in full. No mortgage, no lenders, no strings. It wasn't just a financial investment. It was the purchase of silence, of space, of not having to answer to anyone for where he parked his truck or what color he wanted to paint his shed. The land wasn't perfect. The cabin on it needed a new roof, the back fence was half down, and the well system coughed like an old man when first tapped. But to Sam, it was beautiful. Untamed, honest, and real. No condos. No Starbucks. Just him, the trees, and a list of projects that made sense for the first time in years. For 6 months, he lived in a rhythm he hadn't known since childhood. Wake up with a light, drink coffee on the deck while the deer wandered near the edge of the trees, and spend the afternoons working, splitting wood, rebuilding the roof, wiring the security system, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He slept better. He ate better. He even began writing again, short essays about solitude and control, which he quietly posted to a small blog under a pen name. He didn't expect readers. The writing was for him. And then came Karen. She appeared on a Tuesday, stepping out of a silver Lexus that idled a little too long at the end of his gravel drive. Sam was inside sanding down a set of reclaimed barn doors he planned to install over the cabin's front windows. He didn't see her until she was already halfway up the porch, clipboard in hand, and smile perfectly laminated. "Hi there," she called out, like they were old friends. He stepped out slowly, protective, but polite. "Can I help you?" Her name was Karen Layton, she explained, president of the Silver Lake Valley HOA, which oversaw the neighboring development that bordered his eastern property line. A friendly neighbor, she called herself, eager to welcome him into the fold. She handed him a printed packet of information about joining the HOA. Sam barely glanced at it. "I'm not in your HOA," he said plainly. "Well, technically, your property is adjacent, and that gives you the option to opt in," she replied, her voice a practiced balance of pleasant and persistent. Sam shook his head. "I won't be opting in. I bought this land specifically to avoid that." Karen's smile didn't crack, but her eyes stiffened. "I understand," she said, collecting the packet with graceful hesitation. "We just want to maintain harmony around the lake. Visual continuity is important, and I'm sure you'd like to keep property values high." He said nothing. She stood there a beat too long before walking back to her car. "Think it over," she called. "We'd love to have you at the next board meeting." Sam didn't think it over. He shredded the pamphlet. The next week, a warning notice appeared in his mailbox. Not from the city, but from the Silver Lake Valley HOA, referencing unauthorized construction and unpermitted exterior alterations. Sam laughed. He wasn't a member. They had no jurisdiction. But he began to feel it, that familiar twitch behind the eyes, the one that comes from sensing that someone somewhere has decided they know better than you about your own life. Then came the noise complaints. Anonymous tips to the county claiming he was operating a generator at illegal hours, even though he had solar. Then zoning inquiries. Then an envelope with no return address containing a printed letter accusing him of damaging shared land near the bordering trail, a path he had never walked. Karen never returned. But Sam didn't need to see her face. Her fingerprints were everywhere. He installed cameras, motion-triggered trail cams at the perimeter, higher-end video systems facing his porch and driveway. He ran the feeds through cloud storage. Nothing fancy, but enough to document what intuition already told him. At night, lights flickered at the property edge. Shapes moved. Once, he caught 2 men dressed in matching Silver Lake Valley shirts walking the line of his fence with flashlights. They didn't approach the cabin. But they didn't belong there. He sent the footage to the sheriff's office. The reply came back, no visible crime. Civil matter. The second time someone dumped trash in his driveway, Sam found a flyer buried beneath the garbage. Consider joining the HOA and receiving full community support. By month 4, it had stopped being annoying. It had become war. The crescendo came when Karen and another board member showed up again, this time with a man in a suit who introduced himself as the HOA's legal counsel. They brought papers, documents alleging that a clause in the previous owner's deed included a temporary stewardship transfer to Silver Lake Valley. Sam read the page. It was laughable. A forged signature. Poor formatting. Notarized in a state the previous owner had never lived in. Sam didn't laugh. He recorded the entire encounter. He asked them to leave. When they didn't, he called the sheriff. That was the first time deputies arrived and asked to see his ownership papers, not because they doubted him, but because the HOA had filed an official civil complaint citing unauthorized occupation of land under shared maintenance jurisdiction. Sam walked them through the property survey, showed them his deed, the county records, and the forged documents. One deputy, younger and clearly uncomfortable, admitted offhand that this wasn't the first time they'd received complaints about the Silver Lake Valley Board. "You're not the first," he said. "Just the first one to push back." Sam knew then what he had to do. He called a lawyer. Her name was Laura Tapp. Sharp, blunt, and as fireproof as the steel coffee mug she brought to every meeting. She didn't blink when Sam laid out the mess. She just asked for copies, then asked for more. Within a week, she'd uncovered not just the forgery, but a trail of fraudulent complaints, many linked digitally back to HOA computers and devices. IP addresses, email headers, metadata, it was all there. The trail cam footage? It showed Karen herself trespassing at the fence line 3 separate times, once leaving behind a printed HOA citation tucked under a rock. The audio from their second visit caught her muttering, "He won't last long." As she walked away from the cabin, Laura grinned. "They brought a flyer to a firefight." The lawsuit was filed quietly. Sam didn't want a media circus. He wanted his life back. But court records are public, and a local reporter who'd been investigating HOA overreach for years caught wind of the story. She reached out with questions. Sam gave her a short interview. The article was respectful, detailed, and devastating. By the time the hearing date arrived, the courtroom was half full with quiet supporters, neighbors, locals, even a few former HOA members who'd left the neighborhood after run-ins with Karen's Iron Fist Committee. In court, the evidence unraveled the HOA's position like cheap thread. The forged documents were exposed. Karen's recorded visits were played. The chain of false complaints was laid out in a tidy, damning line of digital breadcrumbs. The judge didn't just rule in Sam's favor. He condemned the HOA's conduct as an orchestrated and malicious campaign of property harassment. Karen was barred from serving on any HOA board for a minimum of 10 years. The HOA was ordered to pay damages and Sam's legal fees. A formal apology was drafted under court supervision and published in the county newsletter. Sam didn't smile as the gavel fell. He just exhaled for the first time in months. In the days following the court ruling, Sam Holland didn't throw a party. He didn't post a victory message or hang a banner on his fence. He didn't high-five the sheriff deputies or pose for a photo in front of the courthouse like a man who just won a public war. He simply drove home, pulled his truck into the same gravel driveway, and sat on the porch with a black cup of coffee that went cold before he touched it. The quiet, the real quiet, had returned. Not the silence of dread, the kind that haunted him at night when he thought about HOA board members trespassing in the dark. Not the stillness before another complaint arrived. This was the silence he'd bought, earned, and defended. No buzz of anticipation. Just peace. But the world around him hadn't stayed still. The article in the local paper had traveled farther than anyone expected. What started as a small community interest piece was picked up by a regional radio show, then a podcast about personal liberty and property law. Sam's name became a kind of accidental symbol, a flag on the map for people who didn't think they had the strength to stand up for their land until they read what he had done. Emails poured in. Messages through the blog. A woman from Arizona said her HOA had threatened to tear down her solar panels. A veteran in Virginia said he'd been fined for using his front yard to grow vegetables. Some wrote entire stories, long, thoughtful confessions of the ways they had been worn down by the exact kind of coercion Sam had faced. It would have been easier to ignore it, to turn away from all of it and return to what he had originally wanted: obscurity, solitude, a quiet life lived on his own terms. But some people were still fighting, still afraid, still getting letters stuffed into mailboxes telling them what color curtains they were allowed to hang. And Sam had something now: experience, evidence, and maybe most importantly, credibility. So he did what he always did when something gnawed at him. He wrote. He published a long blog post. Not a manifesto. Not a victory lap. Just a story. His story, in his own words, from the first visit by Karen Layton to the final swing of the judge's gavel. He included pictures, the fence line, the forged document, even a blurry freeze frame of the HOA board member caught on his trail cam at midnight. The post spread faster than he thought it would. He didn't go viral in the way influencers dream of. But he got the kind of attention that matters. People who saw themselves in his fight. People who didn't want a hero, just proof that the system could still work if you pressed hard enough and documented everything. Caroline, his lawyer, called him 2 days after the post went live. "You're going to get requests," she said. "Interviews, podcast invites, legal questions, probably even book deals. Don't let it get too loud." Sam smiled. "Loud is what I left." Still, the idea wouldn't leave him alone. What if there were others like him? Not just people being harassed, but people sitting on the edge of giving up because they didn't know their rights, didn't know how to fight, didn't know what a proper survey looked like or how to respond to a bogus noise complaint. That's when he built the website. He called it Standstill, a simple one-page site where people could download templates, how to respond to nuisance complaints, how to file a public records request, how to verify land boundaries, how to dispute illegal HOA actions. He didn't charge for it. He didn't put ads on it. It wasn't a brand. It was a lifeline. Within a week, the inbox overflowed. Hundreds of homeowners across the country sent stories. Some of them were heartbreaking. Elderly couples fined into foreclosure, single parents threatened over trampoline ordinances, veterans forced to paint their homes under threat of daily penalties. Most of them just wanted to know how Sam did it. He started calling some of them back. Not all. Just a few. Enough to remind him that what he had done mattered. Enough to remind them that they could do the same. Meanwhile, back in Silver Lake Valley, the HOA was bleeding. Karen Layton didn't appear in public after the ruling. She resigned from the board officially, citing personal health reasons. But word spread quickly. Other board members distanced themselves. 2 more resigned within the month. A financial audit requested by the county revealed misused funds, unapproved expenditures, and several inconsistencies in how member votes had been recorded. One resident wrote Sam an anonymous note. "We never liked her. We just didn't know how to stop her." That same neighbor planted a row of wildflowers where the HOA once fined him for having non-uniform landscaping. No one said a word. Things changed after that. Slowly, but unmistakably. The new HOA board adopted transparency measures. Meeting minutes were publicly posted online. Members could now attend via Zoom. Fines were reduced. Certain policies were eliminated altogether. And the most symbolic act? The fence that once lined the border of Sam's land, the one they used to mark him as other, was removed entirely. He didn't ask for that. But when he saw the posts being dug up and stacked neatly by the road, he nodded in quiet approval. That fall, Sam hosted a bonfire on his property. Nothing formal. Just neighbors. People who had once watched him with wary eyes were now pulling up with coolers, pies, and stories of their own. They stood in clusters, laughing, comparing garden notes, passing beers under a sky so clear it felt like it had been waiting for that moment all year, when someone made a toast to the man who taught us how to push back. Sam raised his bottle, smiled politely, and said only, "We shouldn't have to fight for space we already own." That line would later be quoted in a congressional subcommittee hearing on HOA abuse reform. He didn't know that at the time. He was just glad people were talking again. Like neighbors. Like equals. And yet, through it all, the recognition, the subtle fame, the phone calls, Sam remained, at his core, a man who had simply wanted a patch of land to call his own. He kept working on the cabin. Refinished the floors. Rebuilt the chicken coop. Installed solar-powered path lights that glowed gently at dusk. He adopted 2 dogs from the local shelter, one blind, one loud. Fitting companions, he joked. One to bark, the other to remind him what really mattered. In early winter, Caroline sent him a thick envelope. Inside were 3 new court rulings from other states. Each one referenced his case, his website, or the material he had published. "You're a precedent now," she wrote in a post-it note tucked between the pages. Sam folded the note and kept it in his desk drawer. Not because he needed it, but because it reminded him of what one person's stubborn refusal could become. He didn't need fame. He didn't want followers. But he did want one thing to be clear: no one owns your freedom but you. And if anyone tries to take it, fight like hell, with proof, with patience, and with every legal document you can get your hands on. Years passed. The trees on Sam Holland's property grew thicker. The wildflowers he planted along the eastern fence line bloomed every spring, drawing bees, hummingbirds, and photographers from nearby towns. His home, once just a rundown cabin in the woods, had become a modest sanctuary, solar-powered, self-sufficient, marked not by wealth, but by peace earned the hard way. Sam never built a guest house, though he thought about it often. He liked people, but he liked being able to choose when to see them even more. The gravel driveway remained unpaved. The sign at the entrance was simple and clear: private land, no soliciting, no surveillance, no HOA. People still showed up sometimes. They came from small towns, big cities, distant counties. Some came with legal folders under their arms. Others brought just questions and stories. A few arrived with nothing but tears. Sam gave them time. Sometimes an hour. Sometimes a day. He didn't offer advice like a guru. He offered facts. Evidence. And one central idea: you can fight back, if you're willing to outlast the pressure, and if you understand the rules better than they do. The stories kept coming. A man from Mississippi used Sam's legal templates to overturn a $9,000 HOA lien filed over lawn length. A widow in Nevada used Sam's case as precedent to challenge a vote that had attempted to seize part of her backyard for a walking path. A retired teacher from Ohio told Sam that reading his blog inspired her to run for her HOA board and win, on a platform of transparency and voluntary compliance. Some called him a movement. He rejected that label. "I'm not a movement," he once told a journalist. "I'm just a man who said no at the right time and didn't back down." By year 3 after the ruling, Standstill had become a non-profit. Caroline helped formalize the paperwork. A board was formed, made up of lawyers, former HOA members turned whistleblowers, and a few academics who had written on property law and abuse of governance. Their mission was clear: defend property owners from illegal HOA overreach, provide free education, and push for state-level reforms to prevent what happened to Sam from happening to others. They succeeded. In the following legislative cycle, 3 states passed HOA reform bills inspired in part by Standstill's advocacy materials. These laws required mandatory third-party audits of HOA boards every 5 years, public disclosure of all HOA-related legal filings, verified owner consent before expanding HOA jurisdiction into adjacent properties, severe penalties for falsified complaints or forged governance documents in one state. The bill was even nicknamed informally as Sam's Law. He never traveled to testify, but he wrote letters, long ones, rooted in experience, not politics. "Freedom," he wrote in one, "isn't a vague idea. It's the right to wake up, walk your land, and not feel hunted by paper bullets." In the background, Sam's life continued to be simple and deliberate. He grew most of his own food. He spent cold months reading by firelight, filling yellow legal pads with handwritten notes about things he noticed: birds, seasonal changes, how the air felt different before rain. He kept a journal, mostly for himself, but sometimes for the people who came and asked him the same thing. "What did it feel like when they lost?" And he'd say, "Like something I didn't know was pressing on my chest finally let go." But that wasn't the full truth. The real truth? It had never just been about them. It was about what this country sometimes forgets: that ownership, real ownership, is sacred. Not because of the money spent, but because of what we invest into the places we claim as home. The hours, the labor, the memories. And when someone tries to tell you that your land is only yours if they approve of how you use it, you're no longer free. You're a tenant in your own legacy. That idea stayed with Sam. It stayed with every visitor who sat on his porch, every emailer who downloaded a zoning dispute form, every state legislator who read the first page of his affidavit and kept turning. But the fight also changed Sam. Not into a warrior. Into a watcher. He understood now how easily systems could be bit by charm and ambition. How a smile and a clipboard could hide coercion. How fear wasn't always loud. Sometimes it came as suggestion, as recommendation, as a neighborly concern. And he knew how hard it was to fight it when you're tired, outnumbered, or unsure. That's why he never stopped keeping records. Not because he expected another fight, but because he'd learned that justice often depends on what you can prove, not just what you know. And yet, despite everything, he never gave in to bitterness. One summer, years after Karen Layton had vanished from public life, Sam received a letter. No return address. No signature. Just a short note. "You were right. I crossed a line. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope you still enjoy the land. You earned it. K." He never showed it to anyone. He burned it, not out of hate, but because he didn't need it. Karen's power had ended the day she walked off his porch and realized the tools she used to control others, paperwork, presence, fear, didn't work on a man with nothing to lose but freedom. That was the lesson, not defiance for its own sake, but the simple truth that if you don't draw the line, someone else will. And so Sam kept drawing lines. Not just on maps. In letters, in conversations, in every sunrise he watched over a property that remained untouched by rulebooks. The last time a reporter visited, she asked him, "Do you ever regret not just giving in early? Signing the papers, joining the HOA, avoiding all this?" Sam looked at the lake, still reflecting clean sky, and said, "If I had, I'd still be sitting here. But it wouldn't feel like mine." That's what they never understood. To people like Sam, land isn't a transaction. It's a promise, and promises, once made, are worth keeping.